Hello and welcome in or welcome back to my channel. My name is Deb from DG Reads and I'm here today to kick off a reading vlog for January. What's that saying? Begin as you mean to go on? That's kind of the theme I'm embracing for this particular reading vlog. It's the beginning of January 2025. I've set up a lot of goals for myself. I have a lot of intentions for the year in terms of my reading, and I have a whole goals video about this, which I will of course link for you. So I'm not going to go into great detail on any of those, but in thinking how I wanted to start off my reading this month and what I wanted to do in terms of videos and vlogs, I thought, why not set myself up for some success at the beginning of the year by actually focusing in on my reading goals and making sure I'm hitting several of those to start the year on the right track. So I have plans within this video, I think, to try to hit some books that are on my various bingo lists and priority lists, work on a series, work on my goals of reading more short stories or nonfiction. I don't have 100% of a set TBR for this, so you'll be finding out with me what exactly I'm going to get up to. This year hasn't started off the best. I lost my mother on the 1st, got some really severe weather warnings coming, and I'm still kind of fighting off the lingering effects of COVID. So there's been a lot going on, but honestly, reading is where I'm finding time to prioritize rest and relaxation and a little bit of distraction along with that. So I'm excited to get into this vlog, and once I get reading, I will be back with some updates. It is a chilly morning in Los Angeles. I know it's not cold by most of your standards probably, but for here, it's rather chilly being in the mid-40s. So I'm going to bundle up. I'm actually working from home today, and I figured I'd give you a quick check-in on how I'm doing with my goals reading. And to start with, in terms of having buddy reads as a goal, Malice was my first book that I started for the new year, and I am now 70 pages in, and this is a reread for me, so I think it was a good one to start the year with, since I kind of have a little bit of remembrance of what was happening in this world, but not as much as I thought. There were definitely things in here I didn't remember, so I'm very glad to be back in this world. I'm loving my time with it, and that's really all I'm going to say at the moment, because like I said, I'm only 70 pages in, but I have a ways to go. I figured I would tackle a book that I've been procrastinating, so kind of a procrastination book. I have this one on multiple TBRs. It's on my horror bingo TBR from Sarah at Wicked Reading. It's on my 25 and 25 from Brie at 4 Paws in a Book, and it's a prompt ball book, and that is Neverest. I have the cover off, and naked hardcover is really gorgeous too. This is a special edition from Twisted Retreat that I received in one of their special boxes, and it's one I've been putting off because there's no audio. It's not available on Kindle without buying it, so it's one that I'm actually having to read the special pretty edition physically in my hand, and for whatever reason it just kept getting pushed back. And I'm happy to say I'm actually really enjoying it. I'm just approaching the halfway point. I'm just past 100 pages and it's only 214, but I am finding it really engaging, and the whole old setting, snowy, frosty Mount Everest setting here is perfect for the cold weather and bundling up on the couch to read. So my goal yesterday was to get 50 pages in. I wound up 100 pages in, and it's going well. In this one, we're following a woman named Carrie, and a year ago her husband died. Presumably he went missing during a climb of Everest, and of course no one can survive for extended periods of time alone on this mountain, but she really wants answers. She wants to know what happened. She wants to know why he was alone, why nobody really knows where he fell or what happened. So she's convinced a mutual friend to go and take her up the mountain, hopefully to find some answers when she gets up there. She's not someone who has been climbing mountain peaks her entire life, but her husband was. This was his 4th of the 7 major summits he wanted to do, and some of his enthusiasm and knowledge has passed on to her, so she's not great at mountain climbing, but she has some knowledge. She's not going in completely blind, but there is some question of whether she's truly prepared or not. They're joined by some professionals, Sherpas, and porters to help them up the mountain, and at the halfway point, they are basically past base camp and over the first major hurdle on their trek up the mountain. It's dangerous. It's very much a survival story in a lot of ways so far versus necessarily horror elements, which I kind of expected a little bit more of that. We're also getting in here pages from her husband's journal, which made it back down the mountain, and seeing kind of him talk about some of the things that went wrong on his climb in early days. And there is even one kind of script from a film clip that he took, I think at base camp, before they actually left on their expedition. So we're getting kind of the flashbacks to a previous journey alongside the journey that's happening in the present day with Carrie and the group around her. So I'm finding this really interesting. There are some really ominous notes about the mountain. Start talk about things that go missing, about kind of the old horror stories of previous climbs. And so there's definitely some horror elements to it. It's just been very light so far, so I'm not sure how much we're going to get in the long run, but I'm intrigued to see where it goes. I'm enjoying it, and it's great for a winter day. I'm back to check in with you on some of my goals related reading to start off the year. And first off, in terms of buddy reads, I am now halfway into Malice by John Gwynne. This is, of course, the first book for Faith Follow Along with the Catch Up Book Club. And I have been really enjoying my time. I'm tabbing up a few things and marking off the different POVs and finding it really fun to kind of just immerse myself in this world. I've mostly actually been reading this with my eyeballs, which is not my normal with this chunky of a book, but this one just sucks me right in. I've done the audio alongside the print a couple of times and did a little bit of audio where I had to get up and do a couple dishes, but mostly have been sitting and reading with this one, and I'm trying to do between 50 and 70 pages or so a day leading up to the live show, which will be happening next weekend, possibly the same weekend this is going up. I'm not quite sure, but I will have it linked down below if there are links to be had for the live show. I'm not going to talk too much about my thoughts on this one just because the live show will go into great depth, but I am really enjoying revisiting this. There's much that I had forgotten. I definitely remember some of our key characters and some of the key moments in here so far, but I'm picking up definitely a lot that I do not remember originally. In this one, the main POV, the one that gets the most POV tabs, is Corbin, and he's a young boy. He's just approaching, as the book opens, his name day where he's going to be able to start officially training to be a warrior, to learn sword fights and all the rest. But he is definitely an interesting character to follow. He has an affinity with the kind of dark woods around, with some of the creatures there as things go on, and is a lot of fun. One of the other, I would say, main characters, probably the second most number of tabs, is Veridus, I think you would pronounce it, and he quickly becomes kind of the first man of one of the princes of one of the realms in here. So he's an interesting perspective to kind of see some of the politics going on, some of the battling going on as the prince is going out and facing different forces. There is a war in here from the lore, from the history between the gods, and there are a lot of signs and things going on that kind of lead them to believe there's more to come. There's prophecy that we're getting in here. It's a lot of fun and definitely one I'm eager to be continuing on with and spending time with each day as we are heading into next weekend's live show. And then I have finished Neverest. I feel very accomplished having made this one of my first reads of the year, and overall I really liked it. It was not what I expected from it. The horror elements in here are largely about climbing the mountain and the very real horrors that the people who try to climb Everest go through. The fact that there's so many dead bodies on Everest because people don't make it and they can't really get their bodies down. The fact that there's little oxygen, there's little creature comforts at all up there, and there's a lot in here that's kind of up for debate what's real, what's not. The horror elements that are truly horror elements, I would say, as a genre, as opposed to like a survivalist element, are very subtle. They're kind of background, and you can kind of debate whether they are things that are actually happening versus the fact that they're in this realm of freezing air and little oxygen and psychosis potentially setting in and things like that. I do think it was well done. It kept my attention really well. I did pick it up and put it down a few times, but really I was able to read read it pretty quickly. I mean, it is only a 215-page book, so we're not talking about a huge novel, but I liked the way we got the alternating chapters between this wife who's going up after her husband and the pages from his journal of his journey, and we start to see him kind of feeling some things that she's also starting to feel. And I think the author did really well at the pacing of that back and forth. I think the world building in here, just in the sense of the knowledge of climbing and the conditions on Everest and all of that, were really well done. Obviously, I haven't done a climb, so maybe it's not very realistic. That I can't really speak to, but I think it really did a good job of delivering the sense of danger and the environment and all of that. So overall, I'm giving this one 4 stars. It was a good, solid read, and I did really enjoy myself with this one. So with that, it is Sunday, nearly noon. I've got some groceries coming. I've got a bagel waiting for me in the kitchen right now, so I'm going to get that, snuggle in with Kylie on the couch. She's about to start squeaking a toy, so I better wrap this up, and I am going to figure out what I'm reading next. I'm back with another goals check-in because I have accomplished my goal of reading a nonfiction book for this month. Nonfiction, I don't tend to give midway updates just because I don't necessarily have a ton of different thoughts midway from the end compared to a book with more of a unknown plot and so forth. But for this month, I read Out of Shape, Worthless Loser by Gracie Gold, and this is her memoir. It's her kind of letter to the world of skating. She was an Olympic athlete in figure skating. She has done big things. She's had big failures, all of which happened in the public eye. And she goes into great detail in here about her issues with her body identity, eating disorders, her mental health issues because she suffered from depression. She did have to go through treatment for that, and anxiety as well, and kind of the battle for perfectionism. And there's a lot in here that she goes into and is very, I think, honest, as best I can tell, with her different feelings, with her struggles, with some of the things that have happened to her. Trigger warnings. There is talk about sexual assault, about mistreatment, about being verbally abused by people in power, and people telling her she's fat and things like that, and not giving her the opportunity to kind of own who she is and become herself by herself. And I thought this was really interesting. It definitely kept my attention. This isn't someone that I knew by name going into it. I do really enjoy watching figure skating, but I don't have necessarily a knowledge of who the players are on the field, so to speak, on the ice, I guess. But I thought this was really interesting. I really appreciated the frank discussions on things like mental health and treatment and everything that she's been through. And it's one that I would not hesitate to recommend. Again, knowing the triggers going into it. If you read the synopsis, it basically tells you a lot of things that are happening in here. So if that's of a concern in terms of potential triggers, do take care with that, because she is pretty blatant with a lot of things. But I did really appreciate reading this one. So making some progress on my goals, trying to knock them out. And I'll be back once I have more updates for you. Let's talk some reading goal updates. I have a couple for you actually, and I'm trying to kind of wrap up my super speed productivity towards hitting some of these goals because we've got Winterween coming up and then Final Book Support Group coming up. So let's talk about what I have been up to. First off, in my goal to continue series this year, I did read Battle Drum by Sarah El Arafi, and this is one that I took a while to warm back up to, and I think it's been just long enough for me not to have forgotten the story from the first book, but to feel a little disconnected from the characters. So it took me a little bit to kind of get back into who was who, what the relationships were, what the kind of big ending plot was from the first book. So it did take me quite a while to get into, and I was disappointed I wasn't enjoying it as much as I had expected to. I did really like the world building in here and the way it did kind of keep adding on to what we we knew from the first book, but it took until about the second half when I really got to the point of being hooked and wanting to keep picking this back up. And by the end, I really was enjoying myself. There's a mystery element going on in here, and that had me really intrigued to keep going with it. Obviously, I don't want to say too much about this one since it is a sequel, but it's set in a world where there are different people with different colored blood, and that has been used really to kind of order society into different castes, different levels, different people who are the servants of the world, the leadership of the world. And there have been some rebels who swapped out some of the children. We found that out early on in the first book, and had some of their children raised by the elite families to try to set them up for a rebellion that didn't go exactly according to plan. So this is a really interesting idea, a really interesting world, and I am looking forward to continuing on and hopefully reading the third and final book in this trilogy this month as well. That won't be happening in the space of this particular vlog because I'm going to save that for the final book support group, which is happening later in the month, since, you know, the idea of that one is to read final books. But I am setting myself up for crossing something off my priority series list, and that makes me feel good. And then in terms of other reading goals, short stories was one of the ones that I wanted to make sure I was hitting this year, because again, I keep saying I want to read more short story collections, I keep requesting more from publishers, and then I don't get to them as rapidly as I want to. So the one I decided to start the year off with is Revolve. This is a short story collection. It's a horror collection from Kimberly Basso, and she's someone that I know through Bookstagram and have really enjoyed everything she's written. She writes a variety between these types of short story collections, fiction, and I asked her to autograph a copy for me, so I have a personalized edition, which I'm very excited for. And I'm about, I would say, nearing halfway, or at least a third of the way into this collection, and I'm having a great time. Most of these have a pretty short story, and I really like just how punchy she makes them. She gets to the point. They carry a lot of weight in a really low number of pages, and I really enjoy that about it. We've also got a few illustrations in here too, which is fun. This is telling stories, a lot of which are based on old myths or old classic horror or fairy tales, and I enjoy kind of trying to figure out what each story is touching on. I think one of my favorite ones so far was tied to the whole vampire lore, and we're looking at a Dracula type of figure in the modern era and finding it a little bit difficult to just wow a woman with his fancy estate and drag her off for dinner. And that is something that I had a lot of fun reading, and that's one that I had heard about from Kimberly earlier on in some of our classics buddy read discussions, so that was a fun one to discover in here so far. So I am going to be continuing on with this particular book, and we'll check back in with you later on. Just finished being on the live for Malice for Faith Follow Along, and I will of course have that link down below. I've mentioned it before, but of course that also means I did finish reading Malice, so my goal to read buddy read books 100% taken care of. I had so much fun tabbing this up. I wound up with a lot of tabs. We had a great discussion, and I'm really looking forward to the next book, Valor, in the series. That live show will be coming up on March 9th, I believe, so that is something to really look forward to. And continuing on with buddy reading, I really had a great time actually reading this one physically and kind of doing the 50 to 70 pages a day plan. So that's kind of my goal, I guess, going forward with this particular read along and keeping up with that. I did also finish up Revolve and had a fantastic time with this. This was my first short story collection of the year, and I'm glad I kicked it off with this one. I know this is an author who writes a good horror story, and I had a fantastic time with this one. And I think she does a really good job of hooking you in at the beginning, starting a story, maybe kind of not telling you exactly what the setup is, but saying the character's dead and their head just fell off, and then letting you know what's going on, what's the bigger picture here. One of the stories that stood out to me was the witch character from Hansel and Gretel and the whole candy house in the forest. but made a little bit more modern, and her thinking about how things have changed in terms of how children are lured into the woods and things like that. I really liked how a lot of kind of familiar type stories got a modern twist in here, were just looked at from a different perspective, and that was a lot of fun. She does sell directly from her own website. I will link that down below for you as well if this is something you might be interested in. So with that, I think it was a very successful week. Did I smash my entire set of goals for the year all in one week? No, not exactly, but I definitely started the year off well. Hitting some of those goals gave me a little bit of an advantage for January, and I think by the end of the month, hopefully I'll have at least finished one series. I have already accomplished my Buzzwordathon books, including the fact that the Battle Drum, which I read for this vlog, was my pattern on the cover book, and with my Nevers read, also from this vlog, I did knock out several prompts for my Prompt Ball TBR game and both of the big bingo boards that I'm doing for the year. So this has given me a boost of confidence that I'm going to be on the right track going forward for the year. Let me know in the comments below, how has your reading started off for the year? How are your goals for 2025 going so far? Have you read any of the books that I read in this vlog? Let me know all the things, and if you could hit that like button, I would surely appreciate it, and subscribe if you're interested in more of my reading goals, more of my reading successes, and my bookish content in general. But for now, I'll go ahead and leave here and see you real soon in a new video.